It's completely fine. Welcome back to the Daily Report and welcome to the marketplace. I'm already chatting up my guests for this evening. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the possible recuperation of the economy and the business community. Just today, the courts have nullified the Finance Act 2023, so we have a lot to talk about tonight. Already in my panel, and I'll start with you, Mark. Mark Kaigwa is the CEO, Nendo agency, and an entrepreneur. I have Judy Njino, who is the Executive Director for Global Compact Network Kenya. I have with me Engineer James Mwangi, a Director at KEPSA. And of course, last but not least, Patrick Nyangweso, the CEO of the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Mark, I'll start with you. The Finance Act, the finance bill of different financial years has been a contentious matter. Today, when you heard that this particular act was revoked, nullified, what were your thoughts?
Thank you, Back. Happy to be here. I think that there's never been a time, perhaps online at least, where a bill has been discussed at this length, at this depth, and with this much offline impact. I'd say that sometimes with the research work that my team and I do, we get the question, why wasn't there a reject the finance bill conversation last year?
Right.
The affordable housing levy was there, and so were some other raft of different measures. And so I think as far as we can tell from the social media data that we've analyzed as part of our research with some, 50 million plus online updates,
right.
This year it was a different conversation around sanitary towels, around the car or motor vehicle tax. Right. So I think it's almost as though there's this public goodwill that says, how can these finance bills be written from a place of good governance and with the end consumer, the public, and hopefully with the accountability and austerity measures in mind. So I think we're waiting to see what this means from here, but it might feel like, how can we now rebuild together and hopefully with this new digital form of public participation?
Right. The Finance Act 2023 was, the maiden act for the Kenya Kwanza government. So one might even say that there was, political or even social goodwill with the people. Judy, what were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's really a recognition that a lot of the issues that citizens have been agitating around, there's a bit more attention to some of those concerns. And so I think it calls for us to just take a step back and to really interrogate a lot of the policy, measures that are being put out. Are they really fit for purpose, both for the citizens as well as for the government, but also looking at issues of constitutionalism? Are they responsive in that way as well?
Right. Engineer James, you represent the Kenya Private Sector Alliance in this particular panel. For a lot of private entities, they had spoken about the Finance Act 2023 because it was touching on employees so very much. What were your thoughts when it was revoked?
Well, this was totally unprecedented. At KEPSA, we have always embraced an approach of constructive dialogue with different players. And those include legislature in this case, and also the executive. So we make sure that we participate in any discussion or discourse on any legislation or policy. And we go into research, we dissect the proposals that have been placed in front of us, and we'll come up with what we think ought to be addressed in detail. And in this particular finance bill, we actually had distilled the issues, we had made recommendations to the extent that we were even granted a hearing with the head of state.
Right.
And there was a meeting that was held. And we, out of the 16 issues that we had presented, 10 of them were actually accepted. And so we saw them incorporated in the bill. But obviously, we were very specific in terms of looking at the business aspects. And therefore, we had hoped that when it gets to Parliament, that the other remaining issues would be addressed there. So the fact that this was rejected was totally unprecedented. And it really calls to what is public stakeholder consultation?
Right.
How are the inputs from stakeholders addressed by the team that receives these particular inputs. And I think the other key thing is, what is the accountability mechanism for those that receive these views in terms of deciding what is it that they're going to incorporate or not?
Right.
It was clear that many things had been placed to this particular committee, but it appears that many of the pressing issues don't seem to have been addressed, and maybe people opted for these are the mechanism like we have seen here with the Gen Z.
Right.
One last thing is to also just say that nobody had thought that our young players would actually take these issues to this extent. So we are all learning here.
Right. Viva Gen Z. Patrick,
yes.
Of course, for the finance, I'll just, take you a little forward. The Finance Bill 2024-2025, the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry had, forwarded some of their suggestions. 70% of these suggestions were addressed, but the bill was, done away with. And then the Finance Act 2023 was also done away with by the courts. What are your feelings on this?
Oh, thank you so much. I think we need to ask ourselves, where are we heading to as a country? Right. To me, where I sit from my economic background, I know finance bill is a coefficient of facilitating the national budget. And then budget would now translate to development of the country. Now, as a private sector, just as the engineers put it, 2023, the Finance Act, even before it became an act, we really had to give submissions as the private sector.
Right.
Especially areas that we felt would really interfere with the growth of the small and medium enterprises in this country. And of course, it was passed, and we had to, it had to be implemented.
Right.
Now, for 2024, it came with a lot of challenges. I remember we had a meeting with several stakeholders, even having a round-table discussion with His Excellency the President and also the advisors and also other industry players. Right. And we were able to really single out the critical areas that we thought may prove to be also a burden to the entrepreneurs in this country. Right. Especially in terms of cost of doing business, ease of doing business, and also we realized that the cost of taxation was not going to be really sustainable. Right. And therefore, because you see, finance bill, it will after the end of the day, once it has become an act, it is the entrepreneurs, private sector, who will finance that. So we were like, no, this thing will not facilitate growth, it will not facilitate consumption, it will not facilitate production, and it will not even give, especially the medium enterprises, opportunity to thrive. Right. Therefore, you know what happened, and here we are.
Here we are.
But as Kenyans, we must really chart a way forward. Right. Yeah, what will be our Kenya today or tomorrow? So I think it calls for a robust thinking in terms of a very gradual transformative process towards recovering our economy in terms of bringing stakeholders, and therefore I support what my mentor is talking about, right. The stakeholders dialogue, where we need to have policymakers, we need to bring private sectors to really have a candid discussion, like how do we really move the country going forward. Right. Good.
Mark, I'll come back to you. Of course, these fiscal changes usually has a very huge impact, especially for budding businesses. The environment right now, fiscally speaking, even taxation regimes could be, very hard for businesses. If you could just give us an insight into that.
Yeah, I think that running a business myself, and I think seeing and interacting with Gen Z, a number of my teammates and colleagues are both Gen Z and millennials too. I think that the concept and subject of tax is both something which we've tried to bring in-house, not expecting people to know how to file their tax. It's a rite of passage, I think, as part of employment, especially for us in more of knowledge work. So I think what's interesting, even as the rest of the panel has spoken, I found it interesting even in the office how the word dialogue has become a bit of a dirty word, right. Meaning we want to see action. And so, but I think it is indeed true that you do need dialogue to have discussion, debate, deliberation, give and take, and just a meeting of the minds, as they say. So for me, there's a unique opportunity now around tax to ask. There is the collection, there is the administration, and there's really what you can end up seeing as a result of the collection of tax and a mixture of debt, etc. What I think I've seen online, because my team and I have looked at, I think we started off with a few million, say, tweets. And if you look at something such as the finance bill specifically, somewhere like TikTok, we've seen over 1 billion views. That's billion with a B, of just conversations around this and videos. It's astounding in some cases. So we've never seen a moment like this where people are thinking now about a bill and how it affects their pockets, their purses, the cash register, and even the cost of living. I think when we look at broad research around what do Kenyans 18 to 35 care about, whether it's international research or local, the top 4 things don't change. Maybe the order changes depending on which research firm you look at. So what we've seen is that, believe it or not, healthcare is a big, big one. In some cases, it's tied for number 1. And that's not their healthcare necessarily. It's that of their parents, right? Who are thinking about medical bills, in some cases end-of-life care, or their own. And then you have the cost of living, unemployment, and corruption. So with all of that now, you then ask, well, tax is being collected. It might not be collected at maybe the highest levels. And what does government want? They want to expand the tax base. Who do they need for that? Private sector businesses largely to be thriving in a conducive environment. And so for me, I mean, it's wishful thinking because I think I'm surrounded by the experts. But you
are an expert now.
No, but what I mean is in that I might be an expert at running this research business, but here's the question I have. If we're going to introduce a new tax, I mean, my thing is, even if you introduce every 2, is there an incentive that can be there? Because if we're talking about the third highest thing that young people are saying they want is the resolution of unemployment and underemployment, I believe while government has a large part to play, it's really private sector that can create, jobs, whether it's at the internship, apprentice level, all the way up, because people get promoted, hired, and they expand their economic contribution to a business as the business considers them in turn. So I think for me, this is the question is, tax for me, it's a brilliant time to talk about taxing. If it's taken that way, if government communications shifts this way, I think we could be seeing a very different conversation this year thanks to e-teams, because people are going to see now that same e-teams invoice you are giving is already in the system. I talked to a person in Tanzania quickly who was telling me they've had a similar system to this, all the way down to some, their equivalent of mama mbogas, and they said, we have this, it's part of how we work. So I said, okay, how is it working there? They said, of course, they have a different dynamic, but you could say these are either challenges in waiting or they are opportunities for the taking. We'll have to wait and see.
Judy, Mark has said that dialogue nowadays is a dirty word, but let's have a little bit of dialogue here. When it comes to the conversation between the people and leadership, of course, there is, an unwritten, agreement between the people and the leaders. This shows the doing away with the Finance Act, doing away with the Finance Bill. It means that this social contract was nullified by one side. What would you say the problems are? Who caused this? How exactly can we solve it?
Yeah, Hibak, I think it's a good question that you ask. And I mean, just to your point, dialogue is so important, but even more important is being able to meaningfully, listen to what the sentiments of the people are. And this goes, both sides, both from the government side as well as the citizens, as well as the business and every other actor that's affected by the decisions that we are collectively making. And so for us, I think it's critical that we evaluate the importance and the centrality of dialogue and how we're able to move issues forward. We're able to also compromise where we need to, but critically that also that the issues that citizens agitate around are issues that for the most part have been simmering beneath the surface. And I think it's important that even at leadership level, whether you're in the private sector, in government, in civil society, whatever sector you're representing, that it's important that we come forward with open hearts and open minds to be able to dialogue across the different issues that affect us. And so I think it's a watershed moment for the country to be able to figure out how do we move forward. having, of course, learned the lessons this current experience is teaching us.
Right.
But we believe that really to mend that social contract, it's not something that's impossible to do. It just calls for us to really look at the values that we all, take into account as we are trying to drive economic development forward.
All right. Of course, Engineer James Mark has also touched on, the taxation with a cause. And I'm just paraphrasing him. Every tax that is taken should go into something productive that the people can see with their eyes. Now, when it comes to this particular finance act, a lot of Kenyans, the Gen Zs even were saying, we're seeing you taking the money, we're not seeing where it's going. As the private sector, how exactly has this affected you?
Well, I think maybe just to go back to what my colleague here was saying, I just wanted to address the issue of dialogue. I think what the Gen Z said is they borrowed the phrase from Nike.
Right.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah. Just have governance, be accountable.
Right.
Just do it. They said, we don't want to just talk about it, just do it. But coming back to what you've said, nobody has disputed the fact that we should pay tax. We need to run this country, and we expect a certain level of services. And those services, when they are there, they make our life, they enable us to have a decent level of living. And when you tax us and we feel that the priorities that you have in terms of expenditure do not seem to resonate with what our aspirations are, then we have a problem. And therefore, issues to do with governance, issues to do with having a balanced budget. People are educated enough to see the line items of that budget, right, and what it is going into. And they will ask themselves, is that a priority? And then after that, they will be asking with the Auditor General's, Office of the Auditor General's report, where was that money used for what it should be? So the track record doesn't seem to point at good use of that tax. So therefore, the fact that you want more of it then begs the question as to whether we feel comfortable that we are doing our part in terms of paying those taxes,
right,
and whether the government will be doing what it's supposed to do. The other thing that we're saying is that we are of the opinion that there should be a sustainable framework for public expenditure so that we address issues to do with waste. And then I would also want to add one thing, that we need to also address issues to do with inclusivity and reduce inequality. We need people to feel that they are part of this country and that they can have a decent living. But when we see certain displays, then people really ask, and people are not stupid, they see what you're earning and what you have, and they are really asking, is that commensurate with what you should have?
right,
And where I am, is that fair?
right,
Yeah.
right. Patrick,
Yes.
the Member of Parliament for Kiharu and also the Chair for the Budgets and Appropriations Committee, Nyangweso, has said that now that we do not have this Finance Act 2023, it means that we will have to revert to Finance Act 2022 because it's the only, standing financial act, the most recent one at least. Now, he says we will have to revert all of our budget and all of our expectations back to those figures. What do you think would be the implication for the business world and for businesses, the dispensation of a lot of social amenities and even development projects?
Good. I think one thing which is very clear, as Kenyans, we need forward thinking. And allow me to take you back that any progressive economy needs to address 5 key areas. 1 is the production, 2 is the investment, 3 is savings, and 4 is expenditure, and 5 is the income. Now, why do I talk of the 5? Any country that do not raise revenue through engaging potential players like private sectors to enhance on production, then there would be total economic inequality, what my brother was talking about. Right. Then once we experience economic inequality in our communities, then what do you expect? You will expect a lack of what we are seeing, the youth going for demos. Everybody wants to go for each other because you see the consumption has really gone down, purchasing power is really dropped. If you check the disposable income is really unpredictable, and therefore just like in Kenya you have seen industries closing out, unpredictable tax. So I think what MP is talking about is like going back even to 2022, I wonder, are they really now supporting, or is he really supporting now the 2022, for example? Do you think it will really meet the government demands, especially when it comes to investment? Another thing I want to talk about now, of the 5 I talked about, allow me to talk about expenditure. 93% of the government income goes to expenditure. That is when now there would be disposable income. You will see companies getting money, people are able to expand on their businesses because it's not the role of the government to do business. It is the role of private sector to do business. Government needs to set up a very sustainable and predictable and conducive business environment for the private sectors to thrive. That is when you will see industries being established. That is when you will see us controlling even imports, will enhance on creativity, innovativeness among the youth, and will be able to absorb the ever-rising unemployment. Today, as we speak, in Kenya, we were just having a discussion yesterday when we were celebrating at TVET at 100. And we were saying currently we have around 70 universities in Kenya, let me say tertiary and also other high-level education institutions. And every year, we pump into the job market, let's say calculate 70 by around 10,000. You will see over 800,000. Ask yourself, where are they absorbed? Industries are closing. Look at the cost of production. Because of time, I may not take you to statistical data, and you see where we are even now rated. Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Tanzania here, South Africa, and even now I can compare with also China. Then you see, in terms of industrial electricity, we're not doing very well. In terms of cost of this, we are not doing well. So it means for us to attract investment, one, government must have a very robust plan of engaging private sector so that we really see that by paying taxes, there would be enhanced service delivery. By paying taxes, there would be a stable business environment. By paying taxes, there would be government expenditure and the money would be into the pockets of the private sector. Then through this, we'll be able to see growth in all the counties. And once every county would be able to realize their goals, economic transformative goal, I'm telling you, you will not see any complaint. People will not even say, please drop this finance bill or drop this, because at the end of the day, we'll see level of sustainability in terms of our economic transformation. Then last thing I want to say, I think it is high time we really revisit on our constitution, because public participation, I think, as shown in the constitution of 2010 has not really been exhausted. So why must we wait until finance bill goes to parliament, it goes for presidential assent, when we realize it has gaps? I think it should be owned from the onset. By the time it is drafted, we should really enhance on public participation so that every taxpayer would be able to appreciate that, look, they want to charge, increase this on the cost of bread. And therefore, if I pay these taxes, then my service delivery, I would be able to get excellent education services or facilities. I would be able to get best services when it comes to healthcare facilities. I would be able, industries would be able to expand, will be able to get employment and a lot of services. Then through that, I think Kenyans would really enjoy and will be able to pay taxes. But we must build our country. So it is a robust discussion that we must have.
Patrick has gotten quite passionate about that. Let the private sector do its job. Let the people give their opinions so that we may have a robust economy. We go for a very short break. When we come back, we continue with this conversation.